We are barely a few weeks into the start of January, and the AFL is already making headlines with the amount of injuries that AFL players have sustained. Kane Cornes is going on rants. Players are dropping left and right like flies. We've got players missing for the season. We've got players having interrupted preseasons. So today we are going to go through the reasons why the AFL might be having such an injury crisis, how to fix it, and why it probably won't ever be fixed. So grab a coffee, stick around, and let's just get right into it. So over time, it feels like the amount of injuries in the preseason has just been going up and up and up. And for a lot of that time, a lot of the media pundits, a lot of fans, a lot of people online have just been saying that players are getting softer, the training standards are getting way too high, and players aren't able to keep up at this level because they're just not training hard enough. But as we're seeing this just happen year after year after year, at some point it stops being an individual failure and it starts becoming a systematic issue. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because I think this is a systematic issue in the AFL, and we have some evidence to back that up. So the first thing we need to address is the fact that the AFL's biggest media star, Kane Cornes, has come out and gone on an absolute rant. And most of his rants I don't necessarily agree with, but this one specific rant that he went on earlier this week, I kind of have to agree with, and he's kind of got a point, and he's kind of in the right, because Kane has claimed that a lot of these injuries are as a result of players having too much time off. So at the moment, AFL players are giving 93 days off at the end of every season. They come back just before Christmas to do 3, 4, or 5 weeks worth of work, depending on their stature in the game, as in how long they've played in the game. There are first to 4 years that come back earlier, fifth year older come back later, and even later for some of the veterans. Then the players have an additional break over the Christmas and New Year's period, and then they are back into full-time training, full-time high-intensity training at the start of January. But that only leaves about a month before there are legitimate high-intensity, full-contact games of football, like this year where we have the State of Origin on February 14th, which is only just over a month after the players have come back to training in January, as well as practice matches starting around that time as well, and then round one obviously towards the end of March. But the real point that Kane Cornes is trying to make here is not necessarily the fact that there is a lot of time off for players. It's really two main issues. One is the fact that during this time off, the clubs and the league isn't necessarily allowed to contact or monitor any of the players. They aren't allowed to communicate about training standards. They aren't allowed to mandate that players are supposed to be adhering to their training programs. They are supposed to be essentially disconnected between club and player. And that is a massive issue, because when you don't have players that are adhering to massive training standards or are keeping their body fit, and they come back at the end of that Christmas and New Year's break, and they're expected to play a game of AFL football in a month, maybe just over a month, the clubs have to rapidly try and get their players' bodies and their players' cardio systems and their muscles ready for that high-intensity, full-contact game of AFL football, which means in that month between January 12th or January 10th when the players come back and the first game of football, that is a lot of load to put into the player's body, which is what Kane is actually complaining about. He's not necessarily complaining about the overall time off. He's complaining about the time off where players aren't able to be contacted or monitored by the club. And I get it, you're probably listening to this saying, for us local battlers, it's fine for us to rock up, a week before the preseason, a week before round one of our local footy season, but we're also not expected to try and keep up with Nick Dacos or Marcus Bontempelli around a contest. Like, there's a different level of physical attributes needed to play the game at the highest level, and the players aren't getting enough time, enough reps in the gym, enough time on legs to actually build up their base enough to the point where their body can handle this strenuous load that they're going to be under, which is why we're getting a lot of these soft tissue injuries, which is why we're seeing a lot of these players managed with injuries. And so in that respect, Kane Cornes' rant is basically on the money. But then what he does next, I think, is really important, because he points to the comments of former AFL fitness boss and AFL fitness guru Andrew Russell, one of the blokes who was a pioneer in the AFL fitness headspace. He led Hawthorn through their premiership success. He also was a fitness boss at Carlton. He has been a genuine freak in the AFL fitness world. And what Andrew Russell has been very, very, very dedicated to is his idea and his opinion that the AFL players are just given far too much time off at the wrong times of their preparation. He has said that a sport that demands such repeated high-speed efforts, contact, and eccentric loading, the players are given too much time off, especially between that Christmas and New Year's period over that break after they've come back before the end of the season in that November period. They train for 5 weeks and they have another 2 or 3 weeks off over the Christmas and New Year's period. He says that their bodies decondition to the load. He goes, they can decondition within just a matter of days, let alone the 15 days or 16 days that the players get off over that Christmas and New Year's period. So by the time they come back in for the official start of preseason in early Jan, their bodies have already deconditioned from the work that they've done the previous year in that preseason period. And so he points to this deconditioning that is leading to players, especially older players, who are getting these soft tissue injuries. This is why we've seen Clayton Oliver. This is why we've seen Toby Green and Darcy Moore and Dan McStay and everyone else essentially, or at least it feels like everyone else in the league, getting these soft tissue injuries because their bodies have been deconditioned over that little break. And then when they're expected to come back into high intensity, full contact AFL training, their bodies have deconditioned to the point where their muscles are just not ready for that level of load. And then the next thing that Andrew Russell constantly speaks about is because he's done so much work overseas, when he tells overseas fitness bosses and clubs and gurus and these people that work in the fitness space in elite high performance environments at elite facilities with professional teams about the training standards and training practices that the AFL has with regard to the time off that the players get, he says that teams and those people that he speaks to around the world are completely shocked that we give our players so much time off. But not only that we give them so much time off, but we give them so much unsupervised time off, actually mandated unsupervised time off, where the club actually isn't allowed to contact the players at all. Because we look at the NFL, and I'm a big American sports fan, so I look at the NFL season and I go, the season is not long at all. It's 17 weeks of games, 3 weeks of preseason, and maybe 4 to 5 weeks of the postseason. The rest of the year, I would assume, is the off-season for the NFL, but that is not necessarily the case, because although the off-season for the NFL is demonstrably longer than the AFL off-season is, the NFL players go on a holiday for 2 to 3 weeks and they are back in the facility 3 to 4 weeks after the season ends, back into supervised, monitored training with the NFL coaches, with the NFL fitness coaches, with those high performance teams at the NFL clubs, which means these players are training for 3, 4, 5, 6 months at a time in supervised conditions under a monitored program in the NFL facilities during their off-season, which means they're given a far better opportunity to be ready for round one, and also a far less chance to get injured during the preseason. Because I think it's pretty clear from what we've spoken about today is that the issue isn't the short rest. It's actually just the short runway that the players get. It's not necessarily that they're getting a massive extended break. It's the fact that the runway that they're given, because the clubs can't contact them, because there are mandated days where the clubs aren't allowed to physically monitor these players in their off-season, that is why we're getting these injuries. And then there's another reason to this, which is just simple. The modern game requires players to be fitter, faster, more explosive, and more powerful for a longer period of time, which means you are going to naturally push the limits of the body over and over and over again, which means you are going to naturally get injuries. Now, when you put these two things together, being a shorter rest period plus a higher intensity and a higher level of physical performance, you are not necessarily getting a very good mix. You're going to get more injuries. You're going to get more overuse injuries. You're going to get more soft tissue injuries because the bodies just won't be ready for the intensity that the AFL is going to be played at. So now we get to the big question, which is, can we fix it? And the real simple answer is no, probably not. And there's a reason why, though. So at the moment, the AFL and the AFLPA, the Players Association of the AFL, have a collective bargaining agreement. And in that collective bargaining agreement, that is where we get the mandated time off, but also the mandated off season for the players, but also the fact that clubs cannot contact or cannot monitor these players in the off-season. That comes under the collective bargaining agreement. And the only way to change that collective bargaining agreement is to get the AFLPA, the AFL Players Association, to agree to it. And getting that is going to be basically next to impossible because the players don't want to give up power. The players don't want to give more power to clubs and the AFL. So we're just going to be stuck in this limbo of this is what the players in the AFL have decided is fair and okay. So even though we're going to get more injuries, or at least we are seeing more injuries being suffered by the players, they would have to give up power to the AFL and the clubs to sort of reverse that or fix the potential issue or the problem or the idea of a problem that everyone thinks it is, including Kane Cornes and Andrew Russell and a lot of the other fitness bosses around the world. I think this is the biggest issue, but the only way to fix that is the AFLPA giving up power, which is it's just not going to happen, realistically. If you like this sort of video, please feel free to stick around and subscribe. As I said, we've got a massive AFL show coming this year where we are going to be doing breakdown videos of the key plays, the key moments, the key players every single week right here on this channel. We're also going to have a wide sports show here where we talk about all sorts of things like the NBA, the NFL, tennis, cricket, every other sport that I end up watching throughout the year I want to talk about. That will also be a show here right on this channel. So again, feel free to stick around and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Cheers.